To build a multiracial democracy, Race Forward needs your support. Join us in dismantling structural racism. By texting RFPOD to 44321, you can help us make more episodes about important racial justice conversations. Support by donating $24 in 2024, a pivotal year for our work together. All donations are tax deductible. Again, support our work by texting RFPOD to 44321.
Hello, Momentum listeners. I am Everette Thompson-Francois, Race Forward's Vice President of Movement and Capacity Building, and your host for today's episode and the season finale of Momentum, a Race Forward podcast. Last summer, People's Action launched their Organizing Revival campaign on the premise that ordinary people, organized effectively, have the power to drive social change upwards to create the conditions for justice, equity, and freedom. The challenges the movement faces is strengthening and defending democracy while pushing back against a far-right authoritarian agenda empowered by former President Trump. The main strategy of the Organizing Revival is to use the most effective practices of relational, power-based community organizing. It's been more than 3 years since the defeat of former President Trump in 2020, a monumental win for the racial justice movement. But the ramifications of his administration continue to be felt to this day in our communities and in our institutions. With 2024 looking to be another historic election, how does the Organizing Revival make the most of the moment? And how will this year determine the future for movement building and community organizing? On this episode of Momentum, a Race Forward podcast, I'll be interviewing Sulma Arias, the Executive Director of People's Action and People's Action Institute, about People's Action and the Organizing Revival, the work in 2024 and beyond, and what it will take to inspire the next generation of organizing that will generate long-term movement power for our communities. Sulma Arias brings over 20 years of organizing experience to her role as Executive Director for People's Action Institute and People's Action. Sulma's organizing work spans many issues, including immigrant rights, voting rights, and economic justice. And her practice has always seemed to directly impact the people to build power. Sulma has worked closely with local and national organizations to build and advance strategic campaigns that build power. Sulma also has extensive experience training organizers and growing organizing capacity and building strong community-led organizations across the country. She has approached her decades of grassroots organizing with what she calls a warrior mentality, deeply rooted in the social movements of Latin America's history. This includes maintaining resilience, a quality that is developed from withstanding tragedy and learning that the struggle for justice and equality is continuous and not tied to winning or losing a particular election or campaign. Her approach to organizing and building people power draws not only on the resilience of human beings, but on the joy that comes from work worth doing. Well, I am so excited to be with you, Sulma. We met very briefly at the board meeting for Race Forward Action, and I have known about you and I've seen you be in action at People's Action. So I'm excited to begin to know more about you, more about the work, and what sustains you in leading just amazing work in this moment, this movement moment.
Thank you, Everett. It is so good to be here, and I am looking forward to the conversation. Yes, it was great to see you. What was it, 2 weeks ago? Nowadays, time just runs together, but it's good to finally be having this conversation, and I'm looking forward to it.
So, Sulma, tell us a little bit about your story and what brought you to what I would call the ministry of organizing, but most importantly, the ministry of shifting the material conditions for people who need it most.
So that is a loaded question, and I love it. And it's hard to know where to dive in, but I'm just going to start, at the beginning. I have the privilege, and to your point, as a ministry right now, to be leading an organization that I call home. It's my political home. It's an honor for me to be in this moment, in this role as the executive director of People's Action. I bring to that role different journeys as an immigrant woman, an indigenous woman, a woman of color, and also a Kansan, because I've lived in Wichita, Kansas for over 40 years. Over a longer conversation one day, I could tell you how I ended up in Kansas. But basically at the age of 12, I had to flee El Salvador's war that, ended up killing over 80,000 people. And so my sisters and I fled to the United States, and Kansas was our home. We came to Kansas eventually to look for work. I was 12 years old when I left El Salvador, 13 years old when I made my way to Kansas. And in Kansas, I found fellowship with fellow immigrants at a local church. And, in those days, at the age of 14, when I came into this community in this state, although I had a community and fellowship in church, I often felt that the way that I related to the broader world around me was in many ways small and disconnected from a broader world. Although it was a great community, it was still very small, and it was Kansas. But that began to change for me when a People's Action organizer knocked on my door. And I think now, as I look back 24 years ago, that moment really changed my life. And, we as organizers, funders, people who really believe in this work, that is a precious responsibility that we have today. And it's something that I believe in. And the reason why I'm back here at People's Action, in this moment where many of us think and are worried about everything that we see around us, climate crisis, the crisis of isolation, and an erosion of democracy, and just people being able to connect to each other. Just like that woman knocked on my door for me 24 years ago and really connected my spiritual life and the work I was doing in the church to organizing, and more than anything connected me to another human being who was very different than I was at the time, is really what I'm about today. And I think really what the organization, People's Action, still holds true. And that's why I'm back here.
That is amazing. Just to think about the power of that door knock, that canvas, that one-to-one connection. And you just mentioned over 20 some years of being engaged in some way or another with People's Action. Can you talk a little bit about the core values of People's Action? What has it historically stood for, but also where's the vision of where it's going?
Yeah. Something that I love as I think about and reflect on my journey, how I got here and why I'm here, it's always incredible to me as I, think about the last 24, 25 years since that woman knocked on my door, was connected to Shell Trap, who's one of the co-founders of People's Action 50 years ago. And at that time, Everett, I was at home. I was a very conservative evangelical, had been doing church building. Actually, when that woman knocked on my door, I was homeschooling my kids. I did not want to send my kids to public schools because of the influence that they would have. Just to tell you the level of just conservative world that I was in. My life changed when that woman knocked on my door. But the interesting thing about it is it's Kansas, right? What national entity? There aren't many national entities that see the potential in a state like Kansas, right? But People's Action did. And because People's Action invested and was investing in Kansas 25 years ago, I was there. I was the woman behind that door where, what do they call Kansas, the flyover state? And there's no political significance whatsoever. So that to me is what's important and why I'm here. It's sort of a full circle moment for me after 24 years coming home to this political home, because there was a moment, I think it was 2020, 2021, when I was sort of stepping back. I was working at the immigrant rights movement and thinking, in this moment, after having regained the White House and the trifecta in this country, we still didn't have enough power to make the change that we needed, right? We are still in a country that is divided and is polarized. And I believe that organizing has the power to transform people and to bring people together. And it was sort of a moment for me thinking where I found that was at People's Action. This is one of the best organizations where, for me, I could bring in the power and what I believe is the liberation theology, which is about centering the voices of people and people making meaning. And when I met people in organizing through People's Action, they were like, well, the answers are in the people who are facing the problem. And I could make the connections. And that is still real here at People's Action. And that's what we're about. So that's what keeps me here, that we at People's Action are really about those that are in our communities. Those people really have the power to guide the future, to govern themselves, and to come up with answers that we haven't seen before. And so that's why I'm back here, because I do believe that this organization still at the core, that's what we're about. It's about centering people, and it's about bringing the collective thought of people and then taking that into collective action.
Oh, absolutely. You're talking my language, liberation theology, shout out Dr. James Cone, and all the ways it's kind of shaped our movement. I was reading some of your writing, one of your recent blog posts. This is one of the best times in history to be an organizer. You talk about people's action being a political home, and also you wrote about a new generation of dissenters and organizers winning investments into our communities at a level that we've never seen before. So thinking about this movement moment, can you talk to us about organizing and what is it taking us to get to this point? And what is the energy, the power that we see in the future of organizing?
Yeah.
I know it's a loaded question, so dig in wherever you want.
No, I love it. I love it because I love to talk organizing. It's so easy to get discouraged at this moment where you think maybe everything seems to be like coming together. And I know that people are feeling like this uncertainty about the way things are. And so it's very easy to get discouraged, right? Because we want more than what we have now. But the reality is, if you step back and think about it, one is that we're still here. We're still, we can still talk to each other, and we can still break through the barriers of isolation. We can still break through that. So I think it's the best moment to organize because look, there is like this incredible billions of dollars, like it's a historic moment. And those historic moments throughout, the last 100 years, we as organizers should really be looking at the past, the present, and how that informs our future, right? And if you think about it as organizers, billions of dollars that we made that happen, movement, organizing made that happen, right? Everything that happens and that government does or people in power do is because we make it happen.
That's right.
And some of us can look at it and say, well, it wasn't enough. It wasn't the 100 things that we wanted, but we got 50, right? And that 50 or half of the things that we wanted made it possible for billions of dollars that are coming to our communities. So any good organizer knows when they see an opportunity that's coming and how that can empower our communities. And what do? We go organize.
That's right.
And so in every community across the country now, we have an incredible opportunity to start a conversation about who gets to decide how those dollars get used, who gets their streets and their houses and all this infrastructure. We get to decide that. The people in their communities get to decide that. So as organizers, we should be looking at those opportunities at the very local level for people to tap into whoever in their communities has the power to access those dollars. And then we need to be at the table.
That's right.
I mean, in the past, these things have happened and we haven't had a chance to decide who gets displaced. There have been infrastructure opportunities before. And when we're not at the table, we see exactly what happens. We see that it's corporations who benefit from those federal dollars.
Mm-hmm.
In many cases, the people who were part of creating the problem, and people get displaced. And especially our people of color get displaced. Like when they built all these highways, who got displaced? Black people, right? And so how do we now learn from the past, look at the opportunity that we have with these infrastructure dollars to not only create material conditions to be better for our people and our communities, but also to empower our people to understand that when they are at the table, that when we are involved, we can actually have a say and we can actually learn to govern ourselves in a different way.
That's right.
So it's important to do that, which is why I think it is the absolutely best time to be an organizer.
I mean, who has it better than us to set a vision, to dream big, and to bring our people along to get the goods? Organizing always gets the goods, right?
Absolutely. But actually, governing and organizing, it's the destination, right? You're transforming people in the process.
Yes.
So it's not a transactional thing. It's a condition of being with one another. It's a condition of building power together. And that, just for being what it is, transformed people in a way that it's just beyond anything we could understand. And that is empowering because when people come together, they can make things happen.
Absolutely.
And that's organizing.
Yeah, it is. I remember being at the organizing revival in June of 2023, and I could see people on fire. They had been transformed, not just in theory, but really the embodiment of what would a powerful body look like connected to other powerful bodies for the sake of building power that is not just transactional, but really seen and felt and reverberating across the country. Can you tell us a little bit about what made y'all want to launch an organizing revival and a little bit about the story and the strategies behind the revival itself?
Yeah, I love it. And I love that you were there. And it's like, even, when I think about it, still fuels and inspires me. And that's what it's supposed to do, right? To have 1,000 people in the same room, imagining and inspiring each other. It carries us for 2 years until we're together again next year. So the story of how this came about, I share that I was at Community Change. I was part of the immigrant rights movement. We had won, all of us, the progressive movement, had won incredible things to achieve, Trump out of office. A huge ordeal, right? And we as a movement did it, something to be celebrated. But then we also came to be at an assessment of our power. And so I had heard that People's Action was talking about an organizing revival. So I called my predecessor, George Gale, who was the director here, and started, so what do you all mean about the organizing revival? And what was interesting to me, it was sort of like that voice that sort of calls you, hey, this is interesting, because I grew up in a church doing revivals, right? It was very clear to me that just the word revival, to me, I could see it. I could see it play out. I knew what it meant. I knew how it felt because I had been part of doing revival tents in my church days. And so, George was like, well, it's an idea. And he was, just sort of sharing the vision. What we hadn't done is figure out then what does it mean to actually, as a network, implement what it means to be in an organizing revival. So when I, came in and started talking to the amazing human beings and directors here in this organization, 42 affiliates in 30 states, as I talked to them, what is the state of the field? What is happening? And every one of them was saying our troops and our base is depleted. We have been through COVID. We've been through, a lot of work to try to get the win in 2020 that we needed. And we sort of need to get back to basis. We need to work on building base. We need to work on the rigor and practice of what good organizing is. And, every one of the conversations that I was having with directors was about, we need to get back to the basics and we need an organizing revival. And for us, that means, we really need to get back to what we're all about. We need to get back to the power of bringing people together, but also, organizing, as we've been saying and as we've been talking about, it's not just memorizing a set of tactics and just going to do it. It's actually stepping back to be able to slow down, to go deep with people. It's really transformational in terms of relationships. And yes, there's all these tactics and methodologies that you use, but at the core, are we able to connect to people? And so we needed to step back. And so at the convention in June of 2023, we spent about a year and a half, having these conversations across the network and getting alignment that the 42 affiliates were down to taking a moment to step back, to deepening and strengthening what we know, the methodologies that we know about organizing, to changing them as well. Like, what do we know? What do we need to keep and go deep in? And what do we need to change? What do we need to adapt, right? Because the same thing that worked 30 years ago is not working now, right? So it was a moment of reckoning. It's a moment of assessment of our own power and where we wanted to go from here. And so we did a whole process of going deep with every one of our affiliates, getting commitments that people wanted to grow our base and to deepen organizing in the practice. And so by the time we got to the convention, it was a celebration and a public commitment that we were going to double our base and that we were going to focus on the practice and rigor of good organizing, meaning that we were going to do training, deep training of all our organizers, deep mentoring. And that's what we're doing. So June sort of kicked off the commitment across the network that we would be in a different moment. Like, yes, we still work on issues and that's important, but we sort of had to look at, like, are these the issues that are coming out of our communities that are not top down? And we reassessed all of our campaigns. We reassessed the structure of the organization and what is this really building the state power, empowering our communities that we need. So we've done a whole reassessment of our structure and we've prioritized training and deepening the connection with people, which is going back to basics. And how is it that they say we're stepping down a little bit to build trust and to deepen the core of who we are as People's Action? And, we're all excited about, because we're taking a moment to go bigger and to go faster. But at this moment, it means stopping to really understand what we're doing, who we're doing it with, and what it means. So it's been a moment of assessment and building our core.
That is amazing. I always like to think about organizing is an art and a science. And it takes that level of assessment and the level of like thinking through how can we get better? And for the sake of what are we getting better for?
Mm-hmm.
So that our folk, whoever we define our folk as, can move more and closer into their power for the sake of what they believe in. And you mentioned a couple of times the base. Could you tell us a little bit about who is the base that you have within People's Action and the base that you're trying to grow? Who are the folks that we're looking for to get an organized relationship with?
Yeah. And that's actually one of the questions where we as a network spent a lot of time digging in, right? The traditional organizing People's Action base is like the people that you are accountable to, the people that are either members of your organization, your physical brick and mortar organization, in Iowa. And do they have 2,000 members who pay dues? That's how we traditionally have described the base, right?
Mm-hmm.
A community that comes together and that is committed to the mission of the organization, in that there's like leadership development and continuous ongoing practice of the craft. And then what we started hearing is people saying, well, we consider base people who also follow us on social media and people who can mobilize. And one important question that I think we had to sit with is the world and the landscape in which we organize has completely changed, right?
Yeah.
So how do we create opportunities, not only for understanding base and the craft in a different way, but also making sure that we're not being so zealous about this is the only way, that we are leaving a lot of people out, right? And so, we've expanded what we think about base. Yes, it is about those people that are making meaning and part of your organization, but there are other ways, like there are parts of the work that fit together and that are part of it, and that other doors in which people come in. In some cases, it may be a very engaged group of people online or a distributed program. That may be the only way that they can operate. So we've expanded to at least say, so what does it mean to have advocates and have people who do the service? And how do we actually think about those who are like the base in the traditional way that are members of the organization? And how do we expand the map to think about all of these connected pieces that actually give us more power, right? And that if we can figure out how to be in a network of people who believe in a different world, who believe that we need a community where we are interconnected. And so we're expanding the definition of what we think is space, right? At the core, we are still for ourselves holding each other accountable to what it means. At the core, it needs to be impacting people, and it needs to be changing our communities. And it needs, in practice, to have us act differently. It needs to bring us together. At the core, it needs to bring us together, and the impact needs to be seen in our communities.
Absolutely. I agree. I'm a preacher's kid too, so I'm just like, yes.
And so if you're a preacher's kid, so what is the fruit? How would we know that we're doing? The fruit, if the tree is in good health, it'll produce fruit, right?
Absolutely.
That.
From the root to the fruit. Absolutely.
Exactly.
The People's Actions white paper, The Antidote to Authoritarianism, is a part of my 2024 reading list. In the People's Action white paper, the overall goal is to build a multiracial and pluralistic democracy with an inclusive economy to defeat the rise of authoritarianism.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what was it written for and why? And also, why would we want to make this a piece of reading for folks in this moment?
Yeah, I actually love to tell you a little bit about the context of how that came about.
Yeah.
I think that it is part of this story of organizing and what it does, right? So that story of, 2 years ago when I had conversations with directors about there's something that we've lost that we need to regain, right? And many factors to what has gotten us here, including that the base was depleted and we needed to really bring back some of the core and transformational aspects of organizing. So that conversation started. And in September of 2022, as I was talking to directors in the network, I also started reaching out to leaders of other national networks who were also part of this ecosystem, just to reach out to introduce myself, that I was now leading this organization, and just to establish, the relationship and hear from them. What are you seeing? And the other beautiful thing that's being part of the transformation over the last few years is that a lot of those directors of these other 50-year-old networks were also new in their role. So we were sort of coming together to say, hey, what are you seeing? How are you doing? What do we need to do together? So we came together in New York in September of 2022. And we sort of, maybe 12 networks came together. And we just started talking to each other about an assessment of the landscape of organizing. And one of the things that was clear in that conversation is that we all said like the same things that we're all hearing and that I was already thinking. We came together and we said, yeah, the field is depleted. Everything that I was hearing from our directors, everything that we had been thinking about, and the way that we've been building that analysis. And at the same time, we were looking back at the last decade, and philanthropy and funders are still not understanding organizing and not funding what we need to be funded, right? So there was an analysis and a look back at the last 2 decades and really thinking, well, what happened? And, was it because the funding was there? Was it because we needed to evolve? And sort of having a deeper assessment. And again, I would say a reckoning of the condition that we were in and what we needed to do to get back and to build the power that we needed. And then we started talking to funders who were also, and especially a lot of new people in philanthropy who had come from organizing, who were also saying the same thing. So what are you all seeing? And why isn't philanthropy funding organizing more? And so we came together and decided we actually need to record it. Like we need to write this. And the intention was to write about what we were all saying and the analysis and what we were all seeing, but also to begin to say what we know works, right? So this is what it would take, right? This is what's happened. This is where we've been. This is where we are. And actually, we know what to do to get out of this. We come from a great tradition of organizing, and we know what to do.
Yes.
And so the intention of the white paper for us is sort of like a work plan, right? It's something we're identifying the problem, and we know what the antidote is. The antidote is organizing. The antidote is the answer that it's always been, is people come, organized people building this power. And we need it now more than ever. We need it to solve one of the biggest crisis of the world today, which is the isolation. We know organizing can fix that.
Yes.
We need to fix the threat of authoritarianism and fascism, which organizing can fix that too, because when people come together and they come out of the isolation, they can govern themselves, and they can govern themselves in a way that lifts everybody up. So organizing at the core is everything. And there's a third crisis that we mentioned, and there are many others, but I think the 3 that I talk about, because it covers and it touches all of us, is the climate crisis, right?
Yes.
And so maybe we can't stop all the damage that we've done at the speed that we need to, but when we come together, we can find solutions to be more resilient and to help one another, regardless of what we face. And so we talk to academics, we talk to each other, and we talk to philanthropy. And the paper is an ongoing plan for us to continue to work and be in relationship with each other as progressives and as networks who believe in organizing and who are part of this ecosystem of building power with our communities, and with philanthropy about what does it mean organizing, how is it happening in our communities. So we're doing these monthly publications, we're writing, we're thinking together. We as networks come together once a month to be in community with each other, to build trust. At the core, we're organizers, so we know that amazing and powerful things happen when we come together. So we are coming together every month to actually put into practice what we've laid out in the white paper.
Nice. I love that it's a living document and dynamic in the way that will continue to sharpen itself, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
I think, too, we're in the midst of another pivotal election year. And I know for us at Race Forward and a part of the Momentum podcast, we want our listeners to get motivated and engaged. So how do you see people from across the country getting involved and getting out the vote, really advancing our work toward a multiracial democracy?
Yeah, English is my second language, right? So every time I hear there's a new word, I think about it a lot and I give it all kinds of meaning because it has to go through a lot of translation in my brain. But it's so interesting. I've been thinking a lot about the history of this country, really multiracial democracy, or even democracy itself, right? Like we've actually never seen, especially like those of us who haven't been part of it, who weren't here, none of us people of color were part of writing that Constitution. The people that were writing the Constitution and were thinking about democracy, none of them looked like me.
Or me, right?
Right. And so when I think of a multiracial democracy and the thought that none of us have really seen what that really looks like, it's exciting to me. And it's one of the greatest challenges that we as leaders and as organizers have in this moment. But it's one of the most exciting opportunities that we, just like organizing, we get right now to think about what would it look like to bring us together and govern? And what does it look like to actually build a democracy that is truly representative of those of us who make up this country now, right? And that's the perfecting, what do they call it? The perfecting of the union, right? And in a country where we're all here together, so we have to figure this thing together. And in a moment where democracy has been so eroded and where people are so isolated that even, as we were talking about the antidote to authoritarianism, the antidote to the weakening of democracy as we know it is organizing. And the solution and the response to a multiracial democracy that centers people of color, but then lifts everybody up to build this multiracial democracy is also organizing. And so that's why, it's still at the core, because organizing is key to building a strong democracy. It's key to learning how to govern, because when you bring 10, 12, or 20 people from any neighborhood across America, and you look at the fact that you need a stop sign, the practice of coming together and figure out how to get a stop sign because, you have children playing in that community, that is governing itself. Also governing, it's a practice, it's not a destination, right? We are practicing how to govern ourselves every day. And we are doing it with people who may not look like us, think like us. And that's the importance of building that multiracial space for us to actually be in conversation with each other, because we're not going to build a strong democracy and the democracy that we all envision if we don't figure out how to work across our differences.
Absolutely. And we're about to come to a close, but I want to, just celebrate just all that you continue to pour into this work from your roots and also from the fruit of your labor, but also from the vision that you see, the possibility of a multiracial democracy where we all belong. What type of advice would you give our listeners around those who wanted to use their stories, but really use and dedicate their lives to this work for tangible change? What advice would you give, and what offering would you leave us for today?
That is a great question, because there's just so much. But at the core, I think one of the hardest and biggest crises of COVID was the fact that we became isolated, but that we also started to like it and we got used to it. So what I tell people today, no matter what, even if you have to push yourself, especially for those of us who were introverts, it was great to be isolated. We actually it's great to work from home. It's great not to see anybody because sometimes people can be annoying. For any individual in this country, in the world, push yourself to come out of your shell, to come out of the isolation that, we just got so used to and we started to like. The challenge for all of us, coming out of our isolation and pushing ourselves to be around other people, to connect to other human beings, is the number one thing that we can do for our health. There's all these ideas of you got to run, you got to, eat your greens or drink the green juice. And at the top of that is you got to be around other people. And especially if you can be around other people who are not like you. So get yourself out of the isolation is the number one thing. And we do this thing that we call deep canvas, right? It's a methodology for us to teach people or train people on the very basic skills of what it means to be in space and in conversation with people who may not think like you and actually enjoy it, right? Because, there is a training to that, especially when this isolation thing and the thought that we just needed to do it kind of started being the norm. And I'm here to tell you, it is not normal. It is not the norm to be isolated. So if you need support, we have trainings that are offered and open to anybody, some basic skill for connecting to people. And it's called our Deep Canvas through our Deep Canvas Institute. So every other month, you can be part of like some basic training on how to connect to people. And you'll be surprised at the transformation that happens in you. I guarantee you, if you try it, you'll love it and it'll transform you. So that would be my offering to our listeners.
Well, I accept. And thank you for the offering and creating space where we can all belong, wherever we are and however we show up. And also thank you for your witness that there is evolution if we just keep showing up from one door knock, one phone call, but also from a consensual embrace. So thank you so much. Thank you, People's Action, and all the work that you do.
Thank you, Everette.
Thank you for joining us for the Season 4 finale of Momentum, a Race Forward podcast. We want to thank Sulma Arias and the good folks at People's Action for making this episode possible. Make sure to follow Race Forward on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter/X. And to support our work, make a donation by texting RFPOD to 44321. That's RFPOD to 44321. Until next time, let's keep the momentum going.